There it goes.
Recording. I'm gonna turn this on.
Hey, good morning, fellas.
Good morning.
I'll just give you a quick heads up on what's been happening here. We had our National Federation meeting this year, and it was done electronically once again. I think we're going to go do a live face-to-face next year, which are always much more productive. But recently, at the conclusion of that meeting, there were a number of questions that were unanswered, and so I sent a series of questions along to the National Federation. There were 17 different questions that I asked to get responses to, and I explained to the rules interpreter from the National Federation that I was going to need those responses for a meeting I was conducting on the 4th, meaning last night. And he said, I'll make sure you have them. And I got them yesterday morning at 7:20. And so, obviously, these were already printed and everything. So there's going to be some information that we're going to discuss based on the conversation or the information that I received via email. But we'll be forwarding that information along to you, so you'll have access to it, but it just wasn't ready in a timely manner. Also, there's another scenario we're going to get to, and having to do with concussion protocol. And there are questions that we have to have answered by the state. NYSPHSAA has to give us the answers. And so we'll discuss it briefly, but you will not have a final answer when you leave here as to what our protocol is going to be until we hear from the people in Albany. Okay. So that being said, let's start right off here with the new rule changes that relative to your uniforms. This was listed as 4 separate rule changes, but it really comes down to is one basic concept. Regardless of what uniform a person is going to wear, whether it be a singlet or the shorts designed for wrestling and the compression shorts with the compression shirt, it doesn't matter which configuration you decide to use, all contestants must wear a suitable undergarment. There were some concerns about modesty issues with people with light colored uniforms that were out there without any undergarment, and things were becoming a little bit dicey. So just think of it this way. Every single contestant has to have a suitable undergarment, and that undergarment must cover the groin and the buttocks. So that would eliminate thongs and things of that nature. It's got to be a real undergarment. And any undergarment that extends beyond the inseam of your singlet or your pants can't extend below the knee. So it's the same restrictions we've always had relative to that. In addition to that, female contestants must wear a suitable compression shirt, which in the actual words of the National Federation interpreter said a compression shirt would suffice or a sports bra. Either one would be fine. And so when they compete, they're going to have on the undergarment, they're going to have on the bra. When they weigh in, they must also wear a suitable undergarment to weigh in, and the females once again could wear a sports bra, compression shirt, or t-shirt for the weigh-in process. Now they wouldn't be allowed to wear a t-shirt to wrestle unless they had special permission, and then that t-shirt would have to be tight-fitting, single-colored, unadorned, with no more than one manufacturer's logo, etc. All right. Remember, they can weigh in boxer shorts, but they can't wear boxer shorts under their uniform as a adequate cover because it's not tight-fitting. The rule specifies it must be tight-fitting. So whatever they're wearing as an undergarment has to fit into that category. Okay. The next one has to do with the shoelaces. Wrestlers shall wear light heelless wrestling shoes reaching above the ankles, and if the laces are visible, they shall be secured in an acceptable fashion. No longer does the rule require the laces to be taped. In the past, it said that the laces must be taped to the shoe. Now, they must have their laces secured, is all it says. Double knotting, it's in here in writing, double knotting will suffice. Okay? So if they come out there and their laces aren't taped but they're double knotted, they're fine. And the major change to this rule is if at any time during competition the shoes come untied, the call is going to be stalling. Now, if you read on here, it says when a wrestler has shoes that have the correct mechanical locking device and the laces come undone from the locking device, that's no problem. That's not a penalty. If they were legal when they started it and now it's become illegal through use, that can be fixed. It's only when they become untied that we're going to. So basically, if they're wrestling and you see somebody tying their shoes, you've got a stall call to make. Unless it's one of these kids that have the locking device.
So you mean locking device, the Velcro?
Locking device is the Velcro. They refer to it as a locking device, but it would be the Velcro or the pocket or one of those things that are meant specifically keep your laces intact. Yes?
Steve, if you have a kid that does tape them, like that, even though it's not required anymore, but and then it comes undone?
Still, it's fine.
It's not like
Because it's legal equipment that became illegal. So if they have taped them and they were legal and for some reason the tape breaks or anything, that's an official's timeout. Yes, yes.
If the shoe comes off the foot, it's an automatic stalling call.
That's correct. And
It's
one
not
of the things that's one of the things I wanted to remind you of. For New York State officials, we put in something in the Green Book that said, in the past, if a shoe comes off during competition, this will be considered as not being properly secured, and therefore a technical violation would be called, because that was the rule at the time. But I want you to change that mindset. Strike that out of your Green Book. I think it's on page 8. Yeah, page 8 of the Green Book. And now, if it happens, and the shoe comes off, it's going to be just the same as if they came untied. Because that's the definition of not being secured. It came off. So, again, it'd just be a stall call.
This is just untied.
Untied.
So if they pop out of the little pocket,
Then we're okay. Put them back in.
we're
Yeah,
good to go.
that's right.
It's only
Because they were legal when they started. Yeah.
Steve,
Wait.
so when they come to the table, are we still looking to make sure they're secured?
Actually,
Or, because it used to be a technical violation that they
right.
can't take
Now we
the
just,
to the-
it's not as much of an issue now, because if they don't come untied, we don't have an issue.
Okay.
Okay? It's only when they come untied, and then we're going to call stalling. So
we
yeah,
don't care
yeah.
if
So
they-
the old days of the inspection. Now this might become a problem in one respect, and I hope it doesn't. But the guy that goes into that funk roll, and he's right here, and he goes. I'm worried that might happen if they start untying it. If you catch somebody doing that, it's unsportsmanlike conduct on them, of course. But yeah.
I think I missed one thing that you said, and I'm just looking for clarification. If a wrestler comes to the mat, shoes are tied, and they have a locking device.
Yes.
And they're good. Now during competition, the locking device comes undone.
Yes.
And the laces are undone. Is it a stall?
It should not be a stall because they were legal when they started.
I thought you said that. Okay.
Okay.
When you say laces undone, you mean untied?
Untied.
If they come out of the locking device and then they come untied,
No problem.
it's no problem.
Okay, so
Because it was legal when they started.
If the locking device has them secured and the locking device
It fails. It fails.
just let them.
It's just like with their headgear came off or any of those other things because they were legal when they started. Okay. Now, if
So
they
if the locking device comes undone, I don't want to stretch this out.
Sure.
If it comes undone but the shoelace is still secured, it's tied, you says go ahead and fix it. That's fine.
tuck it in,
What
but
it comes
if in the process of them wrestling now it comes untied, you can't call that kid for a violation for having illegal equipment because it was legal when he started. I know this seems to imply differently if that's what you're reading into it, but
I
it's
thought I
true.
missed something that you said earlier.
No,
as far as earlier as
If
far
they
as-
started off legal and they became illegal, we're not going to call the stalling call because they.
I think what he's saying is if he doesn't have a locking device and it comes untied,
Yes.
then it's stalling.
Let's-
But if
you know-
he has a
you know how-
locking device
So
prior to
if
everything,
there is a locking device, the locking device comes dislodged or undone,
Yes.
and the lace is undone.
Yeah.
We're going to give them
One thing, back to your question, this man's question here. I've noticed a greater number of kids that have these Nikes and the shoes that have the strap that come across, and they have those covered, and the laces are tied outside of that device. So there's one thing you might want to check, and if they're outside the device when they start, they're still legal, but if they come untied, they're in trouble. So maybe checking is still on the table. All right, let's talk about this. That's all right. No, listen, man, this is good. You bring up some interesting things here. Don't feel bad. Okay, here's the deal. I say Nike mainly because I got guys on my team that have them. They have a strap, and the strap goes across here, but they'll tie their laces up, and they're tied, but they're not behind. They're not utilizing that locking device. So, in reference to this man's question, if they come out, I think we should at least take a look and see, and if they are tied outside the locking device, they're not getting off the hook. Okay, so you make a mental note. This guy's got the shoes with the locking device, and yeah, I could see his laces plain as day. Okay, he didn't use his locking device. Versus a guy who comes out, and I can't see his laces at all. They're tucked in where they belong, and we're good. That person will be given the full benefit of the rule, which allows for the correction of equipment on a referee's timeout. If it's the person who has the locking device that has opted not to use it, as I say, that's becoming more and more of an issue, and I don't know why, but they'll have the locking device and they tie their shoes outside that. Now they're subject to this rule for stalling.
Steve, there's ones that the knot is up at the top, the device goes over it, and the loop is below the strap.
That's if as long as they're
So the knot is
above it.
and
Yeah,
the
those are
strap
good.
goes through
Those are
the
good.
middle of it.
Yeah, those are good.
So,
But you've probably seen guys do this where they'll close that strap up and then they tie the shoe. I'm like,
Right.
bonehead. Boop. That's where I'm saying when this. That's what I'm saying. Hey,
Yeah. The other thing with that is the Velcro starts to go bad on them. They get their older shoes.
yeah.
And just keeps coming undone.
If that becomes disruptive to the orderly flow, you can correct that by taping them. Like he said, if the Velcro becomes worn out to the extent that they're constantly stopping this match, it would be no different than someone who's had a headgear and finally you say, Coach, get him a different headgear or I'm going to have to do something different here. We're going to put you on injury time.
Hey, Steve.
Sure.
I hate to beat this down, but
No, you don't.
ASICS makes a shoe with 2 holes in it in the tongue. So if they just tuck, is that considered a locking device?
I think it is.
Okay, so if they
Think-
tuck the laces in that hole,
Into that
they come
hole.
out and they come undone, it's
My timeout.
Okay.
And if those timeouts become disruptive, tell them, look, we're going to tape those in there now. That's your call. And we're going to talk about that same philosophy later on when it gets to hair covers.
Steve,
Yeah, really.
So if they're properly secured and they're wrestling and all of a sudden the shoe comes off and somebody's hand, it's automatic stone.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though they were properly,
Even though they were in the locking device because they weren't properly secured or they would have never come off. Okay. Man, I hate having to wear glasses all the time.
So for us, though, the main thing is it's no longer a technical violation.
That's the biggest thing to take away from this. It's always a stall call.
Violation ever.
Right, right. And that's where we want to make sure that we get to our membership and let them cross that out of the green book because that will be confusing there on page 8. Sir?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The way I'm reading this, regardless if they're secured or not,
If
they become untied, it's stalling.
There was a lot of discussion about this during the meeting, and the person that printed this up, they were not correct on that. Yes, and matter of fact, it came up. The meeting went on. Somebody later on in the meeting said, "Can we go back to that shoe thing?" And they said, "No, it's definitely going to be if they come untied." And then a third person came in later, and they said, "Oh, never mind. And they said to call it the way I've just described. So, because there was a lot of confusion at that meeting as well. All right. The next thing is Rule 414, and you can read it, and you'll see what it means, but we have applied for a waiver from the state so that we're not forced to enforce this rule. And what it's done is they've taken the rule which puts a limitation on both the size and number of manufacturer's logo or trademark references that can be on any article of uniform apparel, and they've extended it now to apply to the headgear. Well, when I heard that, I've seen, same as you guys, millions of headgears. And it seems like they all have multiple logos. It'll say Cliff Keen here, or ASICS, or Man, or whatever the manufacturer is. They all have more than one manufacturer's logo on there. So, in speaking to the members of the committee and the wrestling committee, they're applying for a waiver, and I'm fairly confident that will be granted. And so now, if the headgear was legal last year, it's going to be legal this year in New York. We're not going to go down that path. In fact, when I sent the letter of questions to the National Federation, he commented that it was never our intention to make something that was legal in the past illegal. I will be getting you out some information that will more clearly define what the intent of the committee was. And I'll be interested to see what that was, and then I'll pass that along to you, to the membership. All right, the next thing is that wrestlers may not wear wristbands, sweatbands, or bicep bands. They have added language to that rule that says they can also not wear arm sleeves or leg sleeves unless they have a pad attached. We've talked about this at the States year after year because more and more kids will wear those sleeves. They go from here to here. If they're just a sleeve, they're not allowed to wear it. They must have an attached pad. All right? Yeah, because even though they're not tights, they said there was no reason for them to wear them other than aesthetics, and so we're not going to allow them. But if they have a pad attached, they're okay. But you're right, that's going to be disallowed. And of course, that will fall under the rule if they show up with one on. That will still fall under a technical violation for reporting to the mat not properly dressed, properly groomed, and ready to wrestle. But that should be handled in the dual meet situation, we'll handle that in the locker room. But I know that at some point you're going to show up at a tournament, and a kid's going to come out there with one of those on, and that correct call would be start the injury clock, technical violation, the match is 1-0, and he has a minute and a half to correct it.
Steve, so the shooting sleeve they allowed last year?
Are no longer legal in New York unless they have a pad attached. Mm-hmm.
The pad has to be attached. I can't wear a sleeve with a knee pad over.
No, it has to be part of the sleeve. Mm-hmm. Attached was what they insisted on. This next rule here is going to be interesting because for all of us for our entire career have dealt with a certain environment as it related to the hair rule, and we had very specific thoughts on this. Now we're going to have to change our mindset a little bit here and become a little more open-minded about how we deal with the hair rule. They've taken two phrases out of the rule book. Well-groomed, because that is such a subjective standard, and what did it really mean? A wrestler must be well-groomed. And more importantly, they took out natural state. The natural state is no longer part of our lexicon. We don't worry about natural state. So when a person, if you look at play pick A, you see the kid has nice tight cornrows, and the next picture the kid has where he's taken his hair and he's twisted it and put all those twists in there. What we're going to do when we inspect our contestants now is we're just going to look at them. Now, they use two different phrases in the book. One is hair that is manipulated, and by manipulated, they mean these cornrows, these twisty things, dreadlocks. That's called manipulated hair. And then they also use a term called physical hair treatments. When the rule book talks about physical hair treatments, they're specifically talking about bobby pins, barrettes, rubber bands, anything that's used to contain the hair. Because I didn't understand that phrase at first, and so I had to do some research. And that turns out to be, if they're talking about physical hair treatments, it's whatever the device is that's being used to hold the hair versus manipulated hair. So in play pick A, we look at the kid. It still has the same parameters. It can't go past the ear, it can't go past the shirt collar, and it can't come past the eyebrows in the front. But when you look at that kid with the cornrows, he passes that in flying colors, right? Nothing's past those parameters. He's good to go. He can wrestle now without a hair cover. The next kid is the same thing. You look at him, and if his hair's all sticking out, and no matter how long, as long as it's not past those parameters, he's fine to wear no hair cover. If you look at play pick C, it shows a young lady with a ponytail, and she's got it contained with a rubber band. However, that ponytail, as you can see, exceeds the specified length rule. So in the case of that young lady, she would have two choices. Well, three choices if she wanted to cut her hair, but one choice would be to put a hair cover on, tuck the ponytail up, and wear a legal hair cover that attaches to the ear guard, just as we've had in the past. Or she could put her hair up as illustrated in play pick D. See how she's got her hair in a bun? That's imagine that play pick C and D are the same girl. If she shows up in the condition of girl letter C, she wears a cover. But if she's modified her hair and uses a appropriate locking device, I guess, or appropriate physical hair treatment, she can wrestle with the bun. All right. The next four pictures are pretty much self-explanatory. As you look at E, there's no reason why he wouldn't be legal. This next contestant has a bun on the back of the hair, fine, because all we're looking at is the hair in the condition in which I'm observing it meet the hair rule. We're good to go. They still have the option of a hair cover if they are so inclined. Now, physical hair treatments such as beads, barrettes, bobby pins, or anything that is hard, sharp, or abrasive would not be allowed to be a physical hair treatment that we would allow. So the question came up, what will we allow? Rubber bands, hair ribbons, and yarn were the only three examples they gave. There probably are others, but whatever they use to contain their hair is going to have to be soft and not offer any injury potential to the opponent. Now, here's a couple horror stories. Yes, sir.
You said a rubber band would be considered
legal. Yeah, rubber band's good. Rubber band, hair ribbon, or yarn were perfect. In fact, almost every reference to this, it says rubber band. So someone from the audience said, well, what else could we use in lieu of rubber bands? And the other two items were the...
I find it interesting because, and I know it's on a much smaller scale, but, you know, hair covers that are of rubber...
Oh, yeah. Well, I can take the reason though is the rubber band probably isn't going to cause you much potential for injury. But just so everybody else knows, when they first outlawed the rubber skull covers was because when you're in a high bridge and you get driven, your head doesn't slide, and there was potential for a neck injury. So that's why. But the comparison isn't fair. A little, but
rubber swim.
And they are somewhat abrasive. Yeah, that's right. Yes, sir.
So you have condition B and condition F, right?
Yes.
But during the course of wrestling.
Okay, I'm getting there. Okay, because that's what I was saying. I'm going to tell you the horror stories now. These are the questions that came up, and these were the responses that were given. Remember, these are not my responses, but these are the responses of the committee. If during a normal competition the hair comes undone, we're going to treat it the same as a person who has a hair cover or headgear that comes off. We're going to allow the wrestling to continue until there's no significant action, and then we're going to put the person on an official's timeout for legal equipment that has become illegal or inoperative through use. Now, some people were really nervous about this, and they were like, we're going to put them on injury time the second time this happens. So I asked for some clarification, and the clarification from the Federation was that's not the proper procedure. We don't want to treat these people any different than other people. We will treat it the same as if a headgear comes off or a hair cover comes off. And if it becomes so numerous, if those timeouts are so numerous that it disrupts the orderly flow, what would you do if a guy had a headgear and it came off in 3 times? All of us, coach, fix it, and all of a sudden now you're getting antsy. You say, Coach, I'm going to stop this match one more time for this headgear, so you should probably get him a different headgear, or I'm going to put him on injury time next time. That's how you can do this, but don't do it any more quickly in the hair situation than you would have done with the headgear situation, and that's fair.
You can use your discretion.
That's a discretionary call, yes. They said in the answer there is no specific number, but yes. And if you think the contestant is playing games, whatever that means, he said playing games, you would do that more quickly, but I don't know what he means by playing games, because I know for sure that ponytail is coming out pretty quick. I'm pretty confident that I've never worn a ponytail, but I think if I was wrestling with one, it would come out. So we'll see. We're going to have to see how this works in real life. I'm not sure.
Steve, with the
What they mean by playing games is when they take you off themselves.
Maybe taking it off themselves, Tom. That could be it, yeah. Doing that whole thing that they do. Right? I've been watching. I know how they do that. Okay.
Wouldn't just a ribbon be a hazard to the offensive wrestler if he's trying to throw a half in and gets his finger caught? I mean, there's no give in ribbons.
I know there's no give in yarn. I understand, and we're going to try to muddle through this somehow, but it's probably no more dangerous than other, like the headgear straps, which you could just easily in a headgear strap. So we always tend to overdo it, and I'm the same way. I always think, well, this could happen, but then I try to relate it to another piece of equipment. Certainly, yeah, if his finger's stuck, yeah. And so then the question came up, Rob?
Yeah, just a question on, we treat it the same way as headgear.
Yes.
With the headgear, I could tell them to get a new headgear.
Yeah.
Or tape up a chin strap because that keeps popping.
Here's how they can resolve this. And when you do your coaches meetings, you should probably remind them of this. One of the best ways to treat this now is to say, Coach, if this keeps going undone, you're going to have to get a hair cover. So then, of course, someone asked the question, well, wait a minute. Don't you have to, if you're going to wear a hair cover, be inspected with it on at the time of the weigh-in? And that's what the rule says. But the National Federation says, let's use some common sense. If this is going to take care of the problem, let them put the hair cover on. First of all, if we're in a tournament, I'm not going to know whether that kid had a headgear or a hair cover at the weigh-in anyway. So that would absolutely be and so as a coach, as a person doing coaches meetings, I would say, Coach, always have a hair cover with you because that is going to be your cure. When that ponytail keeps coming out after 3, 4, 5, 6 stops, I'm going to ask you to put that on that contestant.
It should be a legal hair cover because
it has to be legal. It has to.
Tell them it's illegal. You can't just have a hair cover.
No. I'm using condensed speak, but earlier I said it has to be a legal hair cover and attached to the ear guards. So when I say hair cover, I'm always referring to a legal hair cover. You can't just put some goofy thing on. Pardon me? It still must be attached to the ear guard, and I recommend they all bring one and have it as a repair for that. Now, What about the person who has the bun and the guy's tying up here? They can put their hand on it just like they could the back of the head, but they can't grab it because, it's right there. It's so tempting to just grab that. If they grab it, we're going to treat it the same as grabbing clothing. If they're just holding it, and let's say the kid was just holding onto a shirt, we'd say, hey, let go of that. Because the rule says grasping of clothing, mat, or headgear is prohibited, and any advantage will be nullified. Then it goes on to say grasping of clothing, mat, or headgear to prevent or secure a takedown, escape, all that stuff is a technical violation. So if they're just holding it, you can say, hey, let go of that. If they hold it and they use it and move the person's head, we have the same hold as if it was grasping clothing. This is the same as grasping clothing. And again, this came from the National Federation. If they grab it and they pull it, and they really pull it, that's unnecessary roughness. So you've got three potential things there. Hey, get off of that. Just like if the kid's maybe got his fingers in the headgear and he's not doing anything with it, you say, get off the headgear. That's one scenario. The other one is they're holding on to it and using it to move the kid around. That's the same as grasping clothing. Technical violation. Or if they grab it and they pull the kid across the mat with it, that's unnecessary roughness.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
So do we say, hey, get off the man bun?
Hey, get off his buns, man. I don't think we say that. Oh, man. Man bun.
One last thing, Steve.
Yes, sir.
So if during your pre-meet, there are wrestlers who are going to choose to wear a head cover, we still inspect them.
We'll still look at the hair cover just like we did in the past.
Okay, so now we have someone during a match who isn't using the hair cover, and let's say we get to that point where you've taken a couple of timeouts and you're saying, hey, coach, we're going to have to go on injury time. If I got to stop again, maybe you want to have a hair cover ready.
Yes.
So, as long as, let's say they produce it and it checks out, we just put it on, let's go?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
If the hair control device becomes inoperable, it would be prudent to allow the wrestler to get a hair cover and use referee's time similar to an ear guards break and when you have to replace them. That directly from the Fed.
Yep. Okay.
Prudent. Okay. Uniform changes. Definition of a takedown. The only thing that's changed in terms of defining a takedown, it said that when a wrestler has taken his opponent to the mat and the majority of the weight is borne on the hands, the term majority of the weight has been removed. So all you have to do to get a takedown is have a hand or both hands touch the mat beyond reaction time. They were very specific when they said, we are not adopting the college rule where touching momentarily will suffice. They still have to satisfy the rule in high school, which requires the takedown to be established beyond reaction time. However, we don't have to make a decision as to whether or not they're really bearing weight on that hand. Okay?
I actually got this question.
Any part of the hand, yeah. It could be the fingers, sure. Yes, sir?
Yeah, he got it.
He got it. Fleeing is a technical violation. Last year they gave us the rule about if the wrestlers from the neutral position backed off the mat, that was going to be considered an automatic stall call. And a lot of controversy erupted around the country as saying, well, how are we going to handle fleeing the mat now? This is dramatically altered the way we call fleeing the mat, because in essence, when you backed off the mat, you were fleeing the mat. And so some people were concerned about that. But they did delineate between the two scenarios by saying, yeah, if you back off the mat, that is stalling. But if you go out of bounds or force your opponent out of bounds as a means of preventing him or her from scoring, we're going to call that a flee. So now when you see a person who just goes out of bounds and they've done it repeatedly, but they're not in jeopardy of being scored upon, it's simply a stall call. The only time we're going to call Rule 731 fleeing the mat or forcing your opponent out of bounds is if there is imminent scoring, if he's about to be scored upon. I guess an example would be if a wrestler shoots in on a single leg and gets the foot in the air, and the wrestler who has his foot in the air now is about to be scored on hops right out of bounds. That could be a flee. Or a duck under, rear standing position, and then this kid just runs right off the mat. Again, that wouldn't be a stall because that is potentially getting out of an imminent scoring scenario, and so therefore that would be fleeing. Pardon me?
Defensive wrestler coming up, about to get an escape.
And he forces them off. Yes, great one.
About shooting them out.
Shooting them out is still going to go under the stalling violation.
Do they have to get out of bounds?
No, there does not have to be a stoppage in order for the automatic stall call to be made. So in the past, we assumed that they did. And this came from the National Federation. If he goes right to the line, the moment that he steps out of bounds, this should be coming up. Now the guy can shoot, and wrestling's going to continue here, and we can wrestle. But the stall call should have came as soon as his foot hit the mat, whether there was a shot or not. And no one in the country thought that was the case. We all thought they had to have an out-of-bounds stoppage. And I will get back. We're going to go into that in a little more detail in a minute.
Steve, I thought you told us last night if you step out and the guy shoots, that's
Either way, as soon as he steps out, because he stepped out of bounds, I got a little more advanced on that in a minute.
I got a question here.
Hang on a minute.
Okay, it says here there can be no technical violation for fleeing the mat if near full points have been.
That is correct. That's right. Yes, go ahead.
How about on a takedown situation? The kid's fleeing the mat, but can you still order the fleeing the mat and the 2 takedowns?
That's the only time you can have both fleeing the mat and a takedown is if when they end up, and this question was asked and answered a few years ago, so I'm not making this one up. They said the only way you can have both a flee and a takedown is if you have a toes in call, because you did successfully get out of bounds, and yet the guy was able to keep his toes in and gain control. So in that case, you'd have 1 technical violation, fleeing the mat, and 2 takedown, and we're out of bounds. But that was the only time that you could have both, so you could score the 3.
Steve, I got a
Sir.
question on this. Your example that you gave before about the ankle up in the air. If somebody grabs my ankle and my only direction is to dive away from them, and the line is right here.
Yes.
Now it's incumbent upon me to dive inbound.
Nope. We're still going to follow the same dictates we've always followed as it relates to fleeing the mat. And you'll remember we gave you those 3 guidelines to use. If they are already near the perimeter, so the 3 guidelines were if there's a distance traveled, if they are going in the logical direction of travel, we're not going to call it. And in this case, you're saying, look, I didn't travel any distance. I'm already here, and that's the only way to go. We're not going to call it. A flee what has to be when there was a distance traveled and the intent. Okay, so use the guidelines that were already established in making this call. And here's something that just to kind of calm us all down. Let's say we get it wrong. It's either going to be this or it's going to be this, but at least something's being called, and there's a much greater likelihood that we'll make that call. Now, when I'll explain to you why that is when we talk about stalling in a minute here. But you see what I'm saying, though. If he's already near the boundary line, it's probably not a flee. And if he goes in the logical direction of travel, have you seen the guy that's on his butt? His opponent has his foot. The line's right here. He's going like this, because what else am I going to do? He's right there. That's logical direction. I mean, you're going that way, and here's how I explain it to the coach. I say that's exactly the direction he'd be going if he was on that side of the mat. Okay? See that catch? See how quick I got up there? Oi. Oi. Thank you. Okay. Sir.
Consider the amount of the distance covered.
Distance covered. Is he in imminent danger? And is he going in the logical direction of travel?
Steve, to clear one more thing up. And that's it.
I will try.
But you're saying take down to the back at the edge of the mat, and a guy scoots out. Score could have been imminent. You can call the takedown plus fleeing.
If you end up with a flee call, here's the thing: you're never going to get a toes in call and near falls. If you got a guy that gets put down on his back, all right, and he's already got the takedown, and the guy scoots out of bounds before you get to a 2 count, how are you going to determine that he went out of bounds on purpose? He's on his back, but maybe he's fleeing. Maybe he's getting off the mat, but maybe he's just trying to get off his back. So that's going to be a difficult call to make. You see what I'm saying? But here's the thing. Just remember this, so to Len's question. If you do get a 2 count, and now once you get that 2 count, he can literally go slide out of bounds on his back as much as he wants. We can't call him for fleeing once any near fall points have been earned. Okay. Okay. Stalling rules modified. Is that where we're at? Stalling rules modified. Okay. This is what I was telling you. That's going to be interesting on how we can handle stalling in the future. We have removed the stalling violation from the penalty sequence. Your technical violations, your illegal holds, all those things are still in this column. 1, 1, 2, disqualify. You have another column. Caution, caution, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now we have added a third column. Third column is going to be specifically for stalling. Warning, 1, 1, 2, disqualify. So it's possible that you could have 8 penalty points. 8 penalty points, and you've made 6 calls, 7 calls, because you've got a warning, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 1, 2 over here. So now you've got 8 penalty points, and we're still wrestling. That could happen because it's a separate. Now, the good news for us is we can now make a stalling call without fearing that later on in the match, this kid's going to throw a full Nelson and cause me some mischief. All right, so I think this is going to induce us to call stalling much more accurately and much more often. And
what about the 2-point choice? The stalling.
You're still getting the choice of position for a second. For a 2-point stalling call, you're still getting choice of position. Why? Did you hear something different?
I just assume that if it's not part of the penalty chart.
But it was always specific to the stalling anyway. But they didn't take that out. In other words, they didn't remove it.
Okay.
So it still says on a 2-point stall call, even though they've changed it, it still exists, and your opponent will have choice on the next restart after a 2-point stalling call. Thanks, Billy.
Steve, so it
Sure.
used to be like last year, when you did stalling to 2, there was choice.
Yes.
No matter how we got.
That's right.
No matter how, right.
This year we can only get there one way.
That's and that's fair. It's much more fair, don't you think?
Yeah.
So you're right. So you're gonna have to remember. So the stall for 2.
Yes.
Could be last year could be locked hands, full Nelson, warning for stalling, choice. Yeah.
No. Last year it could be. No. All your stalling stuff is going to be in this category, and when you get to 2.
Correct. I'm talking about
Last year you are correct.
Last year you could get to the 2-point restart.
And only stall once or twice.
Stall twice with a locked hands, 2 illegal.
Yes.
Now all that has to be in the stalling.
He's right. And that's why I say it's fairer, because this guy last year only stalled twice, and his opponent's getting choice. Now he's got to stall that 4th time. Okay, the 4th time, choice. I think it's fair, and I know I would be more comfortable calling stalling more frequently, knowing that I got this little extra latitude.
So it's its own entity, it's its own.
Yes, a separate accounting bracket. So now you have to remember, how many penalties does this guy have? So you can go 1, 1, 2. How many cautions does he have? How many stalling violations does he have? How many times is read back to the out of bounds? How many times has this person stood up with the legs in? Etc., etc., etc. You know what I mean? You got to remember all these things. And then as soon as that match is over, erase it and start over. I don't know why we can't get referees. It seems so easy. All right. This next thing with head and neck concussion time, this is the one where I'm going to tell you as much as I know, and then we're going to have to get additional information. But I will give you the information that is going to, I know, exist, and then your questions that you're going to come up with will not be answered because the answers don't exist yet. The concussion protocol this year is that they have extended your injury time to a maximum of 5 minutes for one of your timeouts. And what it is you still take your injury time out, but if the injury is as a result to an injury to the head or neck, the cervical column, or the nervous system, the person who's in charge of not the referee, not the coach, but if there's a person there that's a designated, appropriate healthcare professional, they will be given up to 5 minutes to make an evaluation. Here's the one thing that can happen. The wrestler goes down and he gets up and he's hurt, and so you say, start the injury clock, and you walk him over here, you excuse that kid, you walk this kid over to his coach, and this coach is examining him, and you got 30 seconds of injury time, coach. And he says, I'd like to have an evaluation done. Okay, so now we got to find the trainer. Cut your clock. Go find the trainer, because it's likely that the trainer will be maybe in another gym or maybe already engaged with a wrestler over here. We are going to keep the clock off until that person becomes available. Once they get to mat side, we will restart the clock, and that 30 seconds will still be part of that 5 minutes. It's still on there. We give them up to 5 minutes to make this determination. If they can't continue at the end of the 5 minutes, it's a default. If they can continue after the 5 minutes, we cut the clock. When the clock expires, the wrestler is supposed to be ready to rise and go back to the center. He doesn't have to have the headgear on and be standing, but at that point, we're going back to the middle. That wrestler should be prepared to rise if he's sitting down and go back to the center. He can put his headgear on the way. Now, you just used 5 minutes, right? And that was for a concussion evaluation. He has just used, I gotta quit saying it, he or she has just used their first injury timeout. But this rule will in no way affect the remaining minute and a half. That person still has a minute and a half of injury time, but the next time they take an injury, it's going to be their second injury timeout. They've got a minute and a half. They might as well use it all. Their opponent will have choice of position. And interestingly, this 5 minutes, you can't bank it. You can't say, I'm going to take 3 minutes of concussion time now and 2 minutes later. No. Whatever you used the first time, you might as well use it because you can't bank it. And if there's a second timeout for injury that's any way related to the head, neck, cervical column, or nervous system, done. So we're going to have to be really, coaches are going to have to be prudent about not overusing this rule because it could come back and bite them. So you understand what I'm saying? Their first timeout, it still counts as an injury timeout because the way they explained this was they said, it's still an injury timeout. What we've done is we've given that first injury timeout an extension that can last up to 5 minutes, but it's only to be used when there is an appropriate healthcare professional available, and then it can only be used that one time. If there is no appropriate healthcare professional, which probably is going to be the majority of your dual mates, you're going to get there, and there's not going to be someone there to do a concussion protocol. And in those situations, we handled it exactly as we always did. It's a 1.5 minute injury time. You get 2 timeouts. Coach, you make the decision. Now, as an official, if you see that this wrestler's giving us signs or symptoms of a concussion, New York State protocol says we can't let him go on. So we have to keep this in mind. The answers to the questions we don't have is in New York, what will we consider to be an appropriate healthcare professional? Number 2, if there is no designated on-site healthcare professional, can a team bring their own trainer? And would that trainer be allowed to inspect only the contestants on their team and other teams wouldn't have that same luxury? Those are questions that have not yet been answered by the state. Their meeting is October 10th. We will get a definitive answer on that date. Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, it's just for a neck or head.
Yep. If it's the ankle,
on his shoulder,
it's normal. It's normal injury timeout. Yep, that's right. This is only for head and neck, cervical column, and nervous system.
If you land on your coccyx bone out of bounds on a hard floor, you
can
have a spinal concussion.
Yeah.
So it's not just head and neck.
But yeah, cervical column all the way down.
Steve, back to the example you gave. He takes 30 seconds of injury time.
Mm-hmm.
Then they decide they want to be on the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
When we come back, he only has a minute left.
No. That 30 seconds is going to be attached to that 5 minutes. Yes. Right. So when that person came over, he had 4.5 minutes because he already used 30. And that's a good question. But
then his timeout, he's got a minute.
He's still got a minute.
Yeah. And if you read this, that's correct. Here's the deal. It says right in there that this will in no way affect the amount of time that they have remaining in their injury time. They will still be entitled to a minute and a half. However, and and I put will in big letters. It will count as their first time out. Okay? Yes, Frank, you have a question on that.
He's unconscious.
If they're unconscious, he ain't going. He ain't going.
There's no 5 minutes.
Nothing. There's a 5-minute ride to the hospital.
That 5 minutes, though, could be a situation where it is a second injury timeout. So after that 5 minutes is up, he has no more injury time, right? Because it's a second
Then we'll go back to work.
timeout.
Yeah. Let's say he's used a minute and 30 seconds, or a minute and 29 seconds. He's got 1 second of injury time left. They could say, I want to go on my concussion 5 minutes. Don't tell coaches that, okay? Don't say anything. Just keep that between us.
Steve?
Yeah.
Say his first injury, he goes in 30 seconds, then he takes the 5 minutes. All right, he gets up, he starts wrestling. They wrestle, he has another injury. He gets a minute and a half.
Yep.
Now, when he returns, does the other opponent get choice of
Yes.
position?
Yes, sir.
All right, because I didn't know if they considered that the first injury
Nope.
timeout.
That's what I'm trying to emphasize. Even though we've extended that injury time to a maximum of 5 minutes, it still is an injury time. It's an injury time, but it's been given an extension.
No, he had the first injury, 30 seconds elapsed.
Yes.
So now you have an additional 5 minutes, right?
No,
But 4.5 because
4:30.
you exhausted 30 seconds already, so you got 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
But that injury clock is frozen at that point. The 4.5 begins to tick.
Let's go through this so we're all clear. The wrestler gets up and you start the clock because you don't know this is a head or neck injury. You know, we didn't see him hit, and we don't know why this is, but we start the injury clock, and the coach is looking at him and goes, I'd like to have this kid looked at. That 30 seconds is going to be part of the 5 minutes. It's not going to disappear. It doesn't go away. But because there's no trainer available, I'll shut it off until that trainer gets here. The trainer gets here, I'm going to restart the clock. That person has 4.5 minutes to make their evaluation.
That clock or new clock?
No. Same clock. I'm adding to the 30 seconds. So there's not... See what I mean? The 30 seconds...
Subsequent injury, which is the second one,
yes?
starts with a fresh 90.
With a fresh 90. That's correct. Yeah,
Wait, Steve. In the first period.
Yeah. Hang on, let's go one at a time because this is more complicated than I thought.
First period takes injury time for 30 seconds.
Real injury time.
30 seconds.
Start the clock.
First period.
30 seconds injury time red. Let's go back to work.
Second period, he gets concussion. Concussion.
He's got 5 minutes.
He doesn't have 4:30. He has 5.
Right.
But he only has 1 injury time left and 1 minute.
Right. Well, it's a second injury timeout. It's a second injury timeout. But he still has, either one of your timeouts can be extended to 5 minutes. Either one can be extended, okay? Typically for 5 minutes, yes. It will in no way, because it says this will in no way affect the other time you have available. So if your time available was already used a minute, don't worry about it. You still got 5 minutes for this next one. That is extended, sir.
In your scenario, that minute that he has left on his injury time is gone. It's gone,
No. It's a second timeout. You got 5 minutes because your second timeout, even if he's only got 1 second left, he's used a minute 29, he's got 1 second of injury time left, and they have a head and neck injury, he's got 5. That 1 second just became 5 minutes.
5 minutes is only to have a head or neck injury.
For the second one, yeah. And it's only available if it's a head and neck injury. So while they're taping that ankle, they better be rubbing that neck, baby. You know, sir.
Just so we all understand that my knee hurts, I take an injury timeout. Second period, I take one for my ankle. Third period, tie score, I bang my head. Coach wants concussion.
No. Don't, you still get only 2 injury timeouts. That's right. Remember it this way. That 5 minutes that you're getting for a concussion evaluation is an extension of one of your timeouts for injury. It's not a third injury timeout. It's not an extra 5 minutes. It's part of one of your timeouts. Very good. So, Rob.
Just once, is there a possibility to use up your 5 minutes and then go on your injury time?
Excuse me. Excuse me. No, it said at the end of the 5 minutes you must be ready to return to wrestling.
Hey, Steve, here's one that will happen.
Yeah.
Two
Wait.
things.
Go ahead.
First of all, you're going to get might be first, might be second. We know coaches can get rather creative with this sort of stuff. A kid that is known to have a bad knee, right? So he tumbles out of bounds a minute into the first period, and as he stands up, he goes like this. He winds the clock for
Yes,
you,
sir.
right? He heads off to his coach, and his coach goes, we're going to check him for protocol. You haven't seen anything, but his coach, because they know that they can get rather creative with employing rules, is going to, do you have any recourse to say yay or nay if you think, if it's his ankle, if it's his knee, whatever that might be? Or do you
I wish you did, but in the society that we live in today, you're going to have to give them that timeout. We're going to have to go through at least a year of this, and they'll figure out the ways to abuse us, but in the meantime, we must maintain our safety in terms of litigation. So we will accommodate them. It's not the end of the world. All we've done is, okay, you got me, coach. You get your 5 minutes. But we've behaved in a safe manner versus we were callous and disregarding of this person's potential injury.
Then the second thing is the wave-offs, because this happens in college. We have our injury clock doesn't start in college until the
trainer arrives,
right? So, but this is what happens. It takes 45 seconds for the trainer in a tournament to get there.
Yes.
And then the guy goes, never mind. I don't want it. Never mind. I'm going back on the mat.
Choice of position to the opponent, though.
What's that?
In college, but that's your timeout, though.
Yes.
So choice of position.
Is what do we charge? What do we charge for time?
We're still.
If we go like this, you say injury time. You start your clock. Coach, I want him, or ref, I want him checked for concussion. You hit stop. Trainer. 45 seconds later, trainer arrives. Okay, here we go. No, my kid's good. We're going to go. What happens first to injury time? What happens to time? You keep him at 30 seconds.
We're going to say, okay, this was your first time out for concussion evaluation. You didn't use your whole 5 minutes, though. You could have, but you didn't. But it's gone now. It's your second.
So as soon as he goes like this, the concussion falls.
Right. So, okay. At some point, we're going to say, look, the trainer comes over and he says, never mind. Okay, never mind. Your 5 minutes is gone. We used it, even though we didn't really use it. It's gone. It just evaporated. Wait, let's do this. Let's do this orderly, yes, sir.
So, just to clarify, blood sign thing. Let's say two kids bang heads.
Yeah.
He gets a cut on his forehead. Blood time first, right? They wrap his head. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to wrap his head.
Mm-hmm.
Coach says, "Then you know what? I want this kid looked at."
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 or 3 minutes.
Yep.
Plus some additional.
You're going to put him. You're going to have the blood when the wrestler is ready to go back to wrestling, with the exception of cleanup. We would stop the clock. If they want additional evaluation because of a potential concussion, now we're going to put them, and it's going to charge it as an injury timeout. So you will have blood time immediately followed by injury time, but that would not be part of their blood time.
And you need a full 5. You're not going to count the blood time against this.
No, that's a separate category. Absolutely. I have just changed my clock.
Right.
This wrestler, with the exception of the potential neck injury, is ready to go back to wrestling. Cleanup's been done.
Because if they used injury, you would count it towards the 5.
So now we're going injury time, and now you have your 5 minutes potentially, and it's your first time out.
Okay, Steve,
Sir.
What if it was a headbutt and you called and he got injured and he was on recovery time and not injury time? He gets the 5 minutes for the concussion, but what if he...
Okay, they didn't really address that, but I will address it.
Okay.
At the end of the 2 minutes of recovery time, they have to make their decision. Even because he was injured with an illegal hold, and there's no specific rule to deviate from that. All this does is give an extra 5 minutes in determining injury time. It extends injury time. It never said it would extend recovery time.
So if the trainer
So
is that injury time then after that? It's recovery time first?
it's recovery time, and you can never start the injury clock immediately following the recovery time clock. But here's the deal. Here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do this because this rule has not been covered. You've just come up with we're going to have to stop that recovery time clock until we get the trainer there. But now we have to say we don't have a rule that allows us to extend the recovery time. They're only going to be given that 2 minutes. But that's the only thing I can tell you.
We're not going to get the 5 minutes?
The 5 minutes is only an extension of injury time. Now, do I agree with it? No, but they didn't think of that any more than I did. You just came up with it.
Are they going to change it?
No, this is the very first time that this idea ever was in front of me. And I think it's an awesome question. The best thing I can do is get a definitive answer from the Federation and find out what their thoughts are. But I'm fairly sure, based on these number of years that I've dealt with them, that they're going to say, hey, the rule book says this is an extension of injury time. It doesn't say recovery time. But I promise you, I will get you an answer, and you'll have it in a timely manner. If I have to drive to Indianapolis to get it.
So right now, a slam on the guy's head, illegal slam.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. Yeah.
Can't wrestle, it's over.
I gotta say that's what the rule book says.
But he wins though.
But he wins.
Yeah.
Or he continues to wrestle.
Or his coach says, never mind, I don't want to win this way. You know, you can still have all those things. Are still, you're just, Maddie.
Yeah.
So he just uses the recovery. He can't go into injury.
You can never do. That sucks. Really, too bad you can't.
I don't really think that any coach would be looking for a concussion protocol if their athlete was injured by an illegal hold or maneuver.
They're just going. They just want their 2 minutes, and then they'll make their decision
They're
anyway.
Win by disqualification. The other thing is, I anticipate a lot of questions from coaches and people that I talk to in our organization. I want to make sure I understand this. Kid is on injury time for cervical or head. Let's say, your example, he takes 30 seconds. Now the coach says, I want him evaluated for concussion protocol. Okay. Stop the injury clock. Now they have 4.5 minutes.
Only if the example that you're giving me, he'd already used 30.
Yes, that's what I just said.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So now.
But we'll keep the clock off till that person comes to the mat side.
Okay. So whether they use it all or not, that's their only concussion protocol?
That's the only one. They never get another one.
So let's say, for this conversation, you put them on injury time, they use 30, coach says, I want them checked. Okay, you stop it, now they show up, you start, you got 4.5 minutes, coach. 3 minutes in, we're ready to go. Now, they take another injury time. The second injury time, they get another full minute and a half.
Yes, yes, yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. And the way this is worded, it says this will count as their first injury timeout. However, it will not affect in any way the amount of time they have left at their disposal. So that means a minute and a half still left. We've extended. You have a potential of 6.5 minutes. If that, you do have a potential for 6.5 minutes of stoppage. Tom, let's go. Tom first.
Thanks. You said you're going to go to the Federation for clarity.
Yes, sir.
But you also said at the onset that the state might come down with their own.
The state, here's the thing. The Federation will give me the response as to how to deal with the recovery time and the illegal hold. The state is going to give me the information as to what will be our protocol, who will we determine to be. Because like for skin, for example, the state has said physician, physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, that's it. Now, the National Federation has said a certified trainer could also check these concussions. And I suspect that the state will say the same thing if they're a certified trainer. But Marty, as of last night, did not know the answer to that. And then the other question was, if there is no designated on-site certified trainer, can someone independently bring their own? And those are the questions that are unanswered by the state. So I'm going to be asking questions from the state that are different from the ones that the Federation are going to be asking.
We also asked the state about this. Do the sectional chairmen have the ability to say, in our section, we're going to use this concussion protocol with recovery? Can they do that?
No.
That's my question.
No.
Will someone explain that to the sectional chairman? Because they're forever trying to manipulate rules the way they want. Especially in
I got into this one other time with Bob Antonito, and it turned out that there was some situation with where he refereed. They were a different associate. Can you help me with this one? Because you're more aware.
I know where he's coming from.
Okay.
And this is a battle between your guy and the Albany NYSPHSAA, and that's all I'm going to say is that as far as I'm concerned, the state should take precedence, but it seems like they have done their own thing anyway.
Correct.
And I don't know why the state has not interfered with that.
Probably lawyers.
Whatever the situation was, I know that I gave them the actual
you're coming from completely.
I want to do what you guys do.
And with the one with Bob, I gave him the actual written interpretation from the Federation, and whatever his group is, they said, well, we don't follow that rule. And so I said, I'm at a loss. I don't know how to deal with it. So that's.
Okay.
Steve, would you recommend, so someone gets hurt in their knee?
Yeah.
They sit with the coach, they tape in their knee, it takes 1 minute. Now the coach says, you know what, my guy's dizzy. So that's still going to be, we did a minute for the knee. Now we're going to say, okay, we'll get the train now. You only
It's still the first time out, and the first time out can be extended. It's still, because we haven't started wrestling again, so it's still considered your first time out. And here's what's going to happen. They're going to do that just to get the blow, and we're going to get taken advantage of until next season. And when the Federation says, well, this blew up in our face, but for this year, you are absolutely correct. The first time out can be extended. And like he said, I know this kid's faking it. He's pulling my chain. How can I not say, okay, coach, you can have the timeout, because you're going to open yourself up to some potential liability.
So, to piggyback on that example, the kid says he's dizzy, he wants to start the 5. They go back to wrestling. That same kid shoots in, catches a knee. As an official, they don't want it. Do we have the responsibility? You are the between the coach and the wrestler. You're their safety net. You have to protect the kid. And if you think that there's a head injury now, and he says, I don't want injury time, no. If any time here's the thing. It says in the state, anytime there is a signs or symptoms of a concussion, that if you have any signs or symptoms, that could be wobbling, fun. There's, you could read what all the symptoms are. You have the authority to terminate the contest. And I don't care if the coach says, well, he's okay, he's okay. No, he's not okay. What are you going to do? Pull out the concussion protocol? No. Okay, because I can't remember, because I haven't studied that yet this early in the season, but the list of signs and symptoms are numerous. And unfortunately, I got a lot of them. It says you're very forgetful, you have trouble walking straight. I got all that stuff. So go ahead, Matt.
Do we have the authority to put them on concussion protocol?
Yes, you have the authority to.
Essentially forcing them to take a first.
You do, and that's not a change. You've always had the ability to say, I want this kid looked at, and they'll say, we don't want injury time. Well, you're getting one. You've always had that authority, and that will extend to this rule as well. Because there's some guys are so emotionally involved in the contest that they don't use their best judgment. It's up to you to use their best judgment for them.
One last question.
That's what you say now.
Well, for this.
I've
been pretty quiet, but at the risk of creating more work for you, is it at all possible that you could maybe draw up 3-4 scenarios involving this and send it out?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like examples. I mean, I don't know if it would help the interpreters.
The officials, they ask.
I know it would help me.
Yes.
Ask the coaches if they have a.
When they arrive. Yeah. Let me throw that in before I do forget. Beginning this year, tell your officials, whether it's a dual meet or tournament, if you have a tournament with a head official, it's the duty of the head official to do this. If not, somebody should be assigned to do this. Go to the host management and say, do you have an official on-site, meet-appropriate healthcare professional to do skin checks? And do you have an on-site health professional to help with concussion protocol? Because those two people could be two different people. It could be the certified trainer for the one, but it has to be a physician's assistant, or nurse practitioner for the other. But we don't know the answer to that yet. Is that's what you meant, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And let's establish that as part of our pre-meet duties, and I think it should be your first duty. Find that out first, and then we can go forward from there. Because, hey, if you're going to go in the locker room and talk to these kids, and somebody has a suspicious condition, and they have a note, and you're going, I don't like it, it'd be nice to know that doctor was standing outside that could come in and take a look at that. Yeah.
Good question. So on his scenario, so the kid hurts his knee, goes on injury time, takes a minute. Coach, I just want to make sure I'm getting this straight. Coach says, okay, I want him checked for concussion. So that minute counts for the 5 minutes.
That's right. So he's got 4 left. Steve, go to
Rob's example. In the first period, he hits his head.
Yeah.
He uses 5 minutes. He uses his whole 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Second period, he says, I'm sick. I'm going to throw up.
Okay, that's a second injury timeout. But being sick can be part of a concussion symptom. And so you'll have a decision to make. Okay.
Second period, he hurts his knee.
Okay. I like that better.
Second injury timeout, and he has a minute and a half.
Yes. I promise. And I know I didn't get this one wrong. I promise you. Because I had a little trouble believing it myself. So.
And on the other hand,
Yeah.
on the other hand, first period he has an injury timeout, knee. He goes a minute 10 seconds.
Yeah.
They wrestle, get back to wrestling. After about maybe 30 seconds, he goes into another injury timeout. He's got, what, 20 seconds?
Yes.
And then after 15 seconds, the coach says, I want to check him for concussion.
Do it. Do it.
They
Hey.
only got 20 seconds to make that decision the second time.
Right. He's got to make that decision before you run out of time. But if with 1 second to go, he says concussion protocol, tick. All right. You'd have to get at him. But, ooh, just missed it by that much. Maxwell Smarta, baby. Yes, sir.
An interesting one.
Okay. Let's go. Whoa. We got to stay in a focus here.
He's only got 3.5 minutes to do the percussion. I mean, sure, he's doing wait till the last minute of injury time, but he only gets 3.5 minutes
Left.
It all counts towards the 5.
Yeah. Correct. It still adds in there.
Okay. So go back to the blood time one.
Wait. This is bad. I know this is craziness, but you got to stay focused, because if you're talking here, you're not going to hear the question, and then they're going to say, "You never said that," and I'm going to look stupid again.
So the kids hit their head, uses blood time, then they go into the concussion protocol.
Mm-hmm.
The kid starts bleeding again, so you have to switch him back to blood. Now you can't go back to your concussion protocol.
You can always go back and forth. And I actually asked that. Can you ever go from a blood timeout to an injury timeout? And the answer was a definitive yes. So let's say, for example, this kid has used 3 minutes of his blood time, and he's ready to go. And he starts back to the center, and the coach says, I got to tape that knee. You can now, without having restarted that contest, go from blood time to injury time. However, you can never go from recovery time to injury time. That's the only one where there's a limitation so far in the rulebook.
Now, how about blood time to protocol, and then back to
then back to blood time, yeah.
Now you can't go back to protocol again.
No.
That's what we're saying.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
He could bleed. You go into protocol for 30 seconds, and he starts gushing out again. You can't go back to the rest of the protocol time.
They should be treating that blood while they're doing the protocol anyway, but no, you can't go back and forth on that.
One more question.
Okay, yes, sir. Gunnar.
Home team doesn't have an on-site person, but the visiting team brings one.
That's one of the questions for the state. We want to find out if we'll recognize that person, and if we can recognize that person, are they allowed to just treat that team, and this team has nobody? And that's an answer that's not yet forthcoming. Okay, got that down.
We're also going to find out if they can designate multiple people.
Multiple people, thank you. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I told Marty I'll get him this stuff on Sunday, and so he'll have adequate time to get that, to provide it to the state. Okay. How about this new signal, though, huh, guys? This is a beauty. Yeah. What's with this guy? Okay. The next thing here, and it would be easy to skip over this because it's at the bottom of the page because I had to sneak it in there, but the overtime criteria for determining the winner of a dual meet that ends in a tie, they've added one additional item under letter F. They have added the team that has the fewest number of forfeits will be determined to be the winner. All the rest of the items, they move down one spot. So when you get to item, if you haven't determined a winner and you get to item F, and you see that, oh, this team had 2 forfeits, this team had 1 forfeit, the 1 forfeit team wins. That's one of your tie-breaking criteria for determining the winner of a dual meet which ends in a tie. Okay. The flashback to the rule changes. This is just a quick reminder to go over with your people that the low cut socks are still can be used for the weigh-ins. They can't take them off though if they don't make weight the first time. That probably that doesn't apply to New York, though. That doesn't apply to New York. Okay. Contestants are considered to be in bounds if a total of 2 supporting points of either wrestler are inside of or on the boundary line. The total of 2 supporting parts can be 1 supporting part of each wrestler or 2 supporting parts of one wrestler. And I just want to spend a couple minutes here to remind us of a few things. In determining what are the supporting points, it's no longer necessary for them to be bearing weight. They can, if a body part, they should probably refer to them as body parts, but they're not really supporting anything, but they're on the mat in bounds, they will be considered as your supporting part that's in bounds. But there are 2 exceptions that can be considered to be your supporting points, and they're not in contact with the mat. The first one is, the rule tells us that if a defensive wrestler is on their back, we have defined on their back as having broken 90 degrees. Once they're on their back, their supporting parts become their shoulder and scapula. And in this position, any part of the shoulder and scapula become all of their supporting points. So let's envision the scenario where the defensive wrestler on their back. Now, with the new rule, if the supporting parts of the offensive guy are in, we can get a pin there, even though this man's shoulders and scapula are out of bounds. We can have a fall there. But in that position, remember that the defensive man's supporting parts are the shoulders and scapula. So if right now the guy with the half Nelson on, he's completely out of bounds. Your offensive guy is completely out. Defensive guy is completely out with the exception of his knees and feet. The knees and feet, even though they may be body parts, they are not considered his supporting points. His supporting points when he's on his back will always be the shoulder and scapula. Therefore, there could be no pin. We have an out of bounds. The only way that pin could survive is if the offensive wrestler were able to get 2 parts in or they rotated. Now, imagine this. The opposite scenario. Everything's out of bounds except for one little shoulder. That shoulder is in bounds. We're wrestling because that shoulder just became all of his supporting parts. And so for the purposes of this rule, the defensive wrestler has all his supporting parts in bounds. We also have to be taking a secondary look at where are they in proximity to the floor or a table or any kind of obstruction. And if that becomes an issue, we'll stop the match. But if it doesn't, and sometimes in the corners it doesn't, wrestling can continue there. So the defensive wrestler's shoulders and scapula could actually be the supporting points and not be in contact with the mat. Take, for example, he's in this position where, like I said, everybody's out of bounds here. When he goes into a high bridge and those shoulders come up off the mat, what's supporting his weight? His head and his 2 feet. And even though those are technically supporting his weight, they're not his supporting points. It's still his shoulders and scapula. So there's an example of when the supporting points aren't in contact with the mat. And then the second one, and this is probably just as common, is when the offensive wrestler has, let's say this is out of bounds. He hits a maneuver, a headlock or something, and they go to the mat here. The rule book tells us that the heels, feet, or toes can never be the supporting points when they're in this position. Okay, it can be when they're on their feet, but when they're down on the mat, they don't want the feet, heels, or toes to be considered supporting points. So in this position here, you watch that line, and when the knees cross, when there's no longer 2 supporting points in, we're out, even though they're not in contact with the mat. That would be true whether I was in this position or this position, either way. Even though the weight is being supported entirely by my feet, heels, or toes.
Steve, how about the defensive wrestler on both elbows when you're coming backwards?
If they've broken 90 degrees, you're still in criteria, and those are still your supporting points, however. Okay.
If he's out of bounds, his scapula isn't touching, but his both elbows are.
We're counting. We're counting. That's right. That's right. Yeah. But while that count's taking place, we have to make sure that there are still 1 supporting part of each wrestler in bounds or 2 supporting parts of one wrestler. So let's say I'm here like this, and he's on both elbows, and my knees are both still in. We're still wrestling. As soon as I pull this knee out, now I've only got 1 supporting part in. Okay. Yep. But certainly.
Gina, you talking about criteria to elbows?
Yeah, that's still criteria.
2 elbows is bad.
2 elbows, high bridge, 4 inches, 45.
And still considered his back is supporting force.
Yes. Because you could break 90 this way or this way, either way. Flashback to the rule changes. Okay. My eyes. Yeah, now everything I just said is written in here and comes directly from the National Federation Rulebook. A false start from a neutral position which creates an injury can be considered an unnecessary roughness, put the person on recovery time. That was a new one last year. The back bow and the Nelson cradle, of course, were identified as illegal holds last year. They also added in dropping to one, we used to say dropping to one knee to break locked hands repeatedly was going to be a violation and of unsportsmanlike conduct. They've also applied that to if you drop to one hand. Okay. Stalling rule modified. They re-emphasized at this year's meeting the importance of a handshake at the end of a match. They would prefer that it not be, in fact, they said, we don't want this hand slaps, and we would prefer that it not be the knuckles, even though that seems to be pervasive among our community. That's, I think it's because of all the germs, they'd rather do this, and so I don't have an issue with it, but I feel obligated to report that the Federation would prefer that we're giving a handshake. The next thing is the off-the-mat referee. I often get this. Tom, you just got done reffing and you're sitting down. Now, Matt Smith and I, we're over here, we're reffing a match. And as we're reffing it, we don't see this action of the coach who took the chair and threw it against the wall, but you did. You have full authority and the duty to make that call of unsportsmanlike conduct. Another example would be if a wrestler, at the end of a match, the match is over, and Matt and I will go to the table, and we're over here looking at the thing, and one of the wrestlers now the match is over, he flips off the crowd or does some type of action that everybody saw except Matt and I because we were over here. You have the responsibility to make that call. You can stand up, make the call, and it'll stick. Now, let's take this example. If it was in the middle of the match, between periods, let's say, Matt and I were trying to figure out what the score should be, and one of those wrestlers commits an infraction of unsportsmanlike conduct, rather than make the call because it's going to affect this match, you should go over to the table to Matt and I and say, listen, while you were over here talking, that one kid just flipped off the crowd. I think you should make an unsportsmanlike call, and let them make the call. Any call that's going to be reflected in the match score should be made by the official or his assistant. But if it's a team point deduction, not only do you have the authority to make it, you have the responsibility to make it. Okay? Here's what happens in the past. The assistant's watching the wrestlers walk off. They walk off, and then we're walking over to the table. Meanwhile, this kid goes, and you see it, and people have felt helpless. But I want you to be aware that you still have that responsibility to maintain the dignity of that event in the gymnasium. You have authority. Okay, and next thing here. This is going to come up very seldom. But if two wrestlers in the championship bracket can simultaneously not continue, let's say they both used up all their injury time or they both got dinged out for stalling, the one who will continue in the consolation bracket will be the person who hadn't been called for unsportsmanlike conduct. If they've both been called, they wipe each other off, okay? But that's very infrequent. Now, neither guy goes on in the championship bracket. That will become a forfeit to the next round. And then, once again, they brought up the subject of headlocks, primarily, I think, because the number of UFC headlock-type maneuvers that have been trickling into the sport of high school wrestling is becoming more and more evident. And they want to make sure that we're not allowing those headlocks to remain in place so long that people are being rendered unconscious. And make sure that we're changing our levels and making sure that not only can the kid breathe, but because really you can go a lot longer without breath than you can without blood. So you want to make sure that they're not cutting the blood supply off. Okay, so we need to be diligent and getting into position to notice that and making sure that we don't have to apologize, because we all know that even every legal headlock can be considered as potentially dangerous. And so you don't need to make an apology because your coaches are going to ball you out. Oh, he was going to pin him with that. As soon as he went unconscious, he might have. But that is always going to be a potentially dangerous situation. You have the authority and the responsibility to stop it if you feel it's necessary to protect the athlete. Another thing is to watch for is that legal headlock where the arm is encircled and he reaches up and locks on his own bicep. That is a real killer right there. And so while it does meet the definition of having an arm encircled at the elbow or above, do yourself a favor, and at your next meeting, have someone put that on you, and you'll see that it is a very debilitating hold. Okay, you don't have to, anaconda, yes. All right. All right, there will be some changes to the program of wrestling this year, and that will be available online. Most of the information that's contained in that document doesn't affect us as referees. It has to deal more with certifications and the 50% rule, and when do they get one additional pound. There may be some areas, however, that you'll want to know the answers to, particularly as it relates to additional pounds for consecutive days of competition. As an interpreter in your association, you'll probably get calls about that occasionally. But I wanted to add to that Green Book that this is the year that we didn't edit the Green Book. Next year they'll be providing new Green Books. But for this year, make sure that you have your members cross off that item on page 8, which defines the shoe coming off as being a technical violation, and change it to being a stall call. When the shoe comes off, make sure that they write that will be a stall call. And then under game conditions for modified wrestling, there's been a slight change. Modified wrestlers can participate in up to 4 points per week. They have a point system. In the past, it said they can only participate in earn 3 points. It's been changed to 4. So if you're involved with a modified level at all, you should be aware that change has taken place. Any other changes that take place that as a result of this meeting coming up from the National Federation and from the state of New York will be provided to your chapter secretary in a timely manner, and so you'll have these answers shortly. Is there any questions or things that we need to go over? I see hands all over the place. Yes, sir.
Just on the program of wrestling real quick, it indicates that the JV wrestler can...
Oh, thank you. That's what you wanted me to talk about. Thank you. Yes. This is an important item, the JV ref and the varsity ref.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes, I had forgotten how important that was. All right, here's the scenario that we're going to have to deal with. We know that as a varsity official, when we show up in an assignment, you're going to have the weigh-in sheet and you're going to check the wrestlers. If they pass the skin check, we should be checking them off. Frank Murata passed, Chad Smith passed. Okay, so now everybody that's legal has been checked off. All of a sudden, I see, Joe Alvarez. No, you got a note? No, he doesn't have a correct form. Joe Alvarez is not inspected. So now at the head table, they're going to see that he's not, even though he weighed in, he may wait maybe in the morning, he's not at go. In addition to that, as the referee, you have a responsibility to notify the opposing coach. Coach Joe Alvarez, he's going to be out tonight. He can't wrestle tonight. You have that responsibility, and they've also put that responsibility on the opposing coach. So if you're a coach, make sure you do it. But I'm primarily talking to you guys as officials. Your duty is to make sure the opposing coach is aware that kid's not eligible. Now, if they're going to weigh a kid into the JV level, they're doing a JV contest, which will be immediately followed by a varsity contest. And they have a separate referee there, and he does the inspections of contestants. The same thing will happen. Okay, you go down the line, you're all past it. Oh, I got to pick on you, Joe, because we're buddies. So, Joe, you didn't make it. That's on the list of kids that weighed in for JV. If he doesn't, if he does pass, however, and let's say he didn't have that skin condition that we know he has, and he gets checked off, he does not have to be re-inspected by the varsity official. I simply have to make sure as the coach that I take this JV form, and it also has to be at the head table, so that the referee can look and say, okay, here's the kids I checked, and here's the kids the JV ref checked. Oh, he was checked. Doesn't have to be checked by me, but he has to be checked by one of us. And how else would I know that if they didn't provide that weigh-in sheet with the appropriate people being checked off? That makes sense? Because that did actually, it sounds like we're making wild stuff up, but it happened.
Yeah, sometimes they have the JV and varsity on the same sheet.
Oh, that's how we did it, because we didn't know who was going to be JV that night. Right. They were usually going to be just exhibitions of varsity, yes. But here's what happens in some of your larger schools. You show up at 6 o'clock, they wait a JV kids in, they have a dual meet, and while they're wrestling, the varsity guys in the back checking those kids. You know, the way it used to be when they had big teams. So when that happens, that sheet is still good, even though the JV ref checked the kid. But there also is a rule that says you can't compete against the same team on the same day at varsity and junior varsity. So you would probably have to have no match or just have wrestled a forfeit. Not a forfeit, not wrestled a forfeit, exhibition. Thank you.
You had mentioned that you had like 17 questions.
I did, but most of them we've covered. By accident, we covered them throughout the meeting, but let me double check. Most of them were injury related and stalling related. Just give me one more minute to double check this. The 30 seconds will count. The limitations of a trainer.
We got you, Rob. We'll make sure you get it.
Yep, everything that was on here throughout the meeting I dispersed it. Yes, sir.
Can we just go over neutral stalling? I think you made a comment about it, where last year, if my foot stepped out of bounds,
yeah.
I shot you out of bounds, we end up out of bounds.
Here's what I just, I'm reading this, and I've showed other guys, and there's two different stall calls here. 824B, which is when you play the edge, and 824E, which is the automatic stall call. So to keep this straight, we're just going to call one automatic. The E will be we'll call automatic. And this is the situation. If from a neutral position, the guy steps backwards, we thought there had to be a stoppage. As soon as their foot steps completely outside the line, the stall call should come up. Now,
doesn't have to be a shot.
Doesn't have to be a shot. If there is a shot, wrestling's continuing because we don't stop the match in a neutral position, okay? But you've already got the stall call, and then we wrestle, scramble around, eventually we go out, no harm, no foul. That's going to be every time that happens. So with or without the shot, you could have a stall call. You don't have to shoot him out. The stall call is going to become before the shot ever takes place, as soon as he puts his foot there.
Which wasn't the case last year.
No, it was not. I got caught completely off guard by that.
You could have a stall call. You will.
You will have a stall. Yes. I thank you. Yeah, you'll have a stall call as soon as he does this. Here, now let wrestling go on. You shall. Thank you.
So no longer has to be a match stop.
That's correct. That's right. No longer has to be a match stoppage. Now, if you have, and I've thought this through after we talked last night, if you still have the action, if before they go out of bounds, before this kid steps out of bounds, if they become engaged in wrestling, it's probably real wrestling. It's probably just action. However, this is when B comes into effect, playing the edge. Now you're going to make a mental note. That kid worked to the edge. The other guy shot. They went out. Okay, that's not automatic. That's not an automatic one. That's a if he does it repeatedly. Okay, so you got to keep track of how the action is getting to the edge. And then I asked, what about the guy who backs to the edge, and then he turns his opponent like this and shoots him off? He said no call on either guy, but you will remember that the wrestler that took him to the edge initially. You're going to think about that, and it's going to be one of those repeated ones on the guy that brought him there, not the guy that actually went backwards out of bounds, but the guy who took the action to the edge. As a coach, I'm telling my guy, don't follow him out there. Stay in the middle. But not everybody does that.
Brings them to the end, and turns them.
Yeah.
And then the other guy steps out. You're still hitting the other guy.
No, not if he. That's what he said. The guy that took the action to the edge and he turns them and then they step out, no, you're not going to, because that's one of those that you don't call either guy. You simply say, red took him there, turned green, and then he stepped out. That's only going to be called if it's done repeatedly, and it'll be called on red because he was the one that was playing the edge. He was the one that got us here.
And it's still entirely possible to have him fade back to the out of bounds line repeatedly, and to go stalling green for back and playing the edge.
Yep.
And then he steps all the way out, and 3 seconds later, you may have to go stalling green for stepping out. You could double bang him in the course of 6 or 8 seconds.
I suppose you could, yeah. Now, the other thing is, if they are engaged in wrestling, in a short offense headlock situation, and they go out of bounds, this guy's got my head tied up and I'm wrestling and we go out of bounds, that's wrestling. But the fact that I'm not standing on my feet and I go backwards out of bounds would not negate the ability for me to make this call. One of these guys here, You know those guys? It's the same as stepping out, because I wasn't. I had an opportunity to turn and didn't elect to turn. I'm sorry, Gregor, but that's stalling. Remember, he used to wrestle from here.
They're wrestling. He circles, like, and then he steps out, but he, doesn't realize it and keeps.
Stepped out. Stay in the middle. That was the real impetus for this, was to say, we want him in the 10-foot circle. This part over here is for emergencies only. All right? Gentlemen, anything else? I wish you all a fond farewell. Frank, anybody else have anything?
10 minutes.
Good luck, guys.